Your name isn't on anything. Pack your stuff and get out before I call the police. My brother said that to me 3 hours after we buried our mother. I still had dirt from the cemetery on my shoes. My name is Cassandra Webb, and 6 months ago, I thought I understood my family. I thought I knew who my brother was. I thought I knew what our mother wanted. I was wrong about all three. Let me back up. Mom ran a small but genuinely successful catering business for 22 years. Harvest Table Catering out of Raleigh, North Carolina. She built it from nothing, from a folding table at a church potluck in 1999 to a full commercial kitchen with 8 employees and contracts with 3 corporate clients. I grew up watching her load sheet pans into the van at 5 a.m. I watched her negotiate with vendors, manage her books on a yellow legal pad, and eventually, reluctantly, let me help her move everything into QuickBooks when I was 19. By the time I was 26, I was essentially her operations manager, just without the title or the salary that should have come with it. We never formalized it because it was a family business, and because Mom had this belief that what was hers was ours, meaning mine and my brother's, and that we'd figure it all out when the time came. She said that a lot. We'll figure it all out when the time comes. I should have pushed harder for specifics. My brother, I'll call him by his relationship to me because that's what he is, nothing more at this point, is 4 years older than me. He left Raleigh the second he turned 18. College in Charlotte, then a job in Atlanta, then another job in Phoenix, then something in finance in Dallas, that he was always vague about. He came home for Thanksgiving, maybe half the years, sometimes Christmas. He called Mom on her birthday if he remembered. When she got her first cancer diagnosis 3 years ago, he flew in for the weekend, cried in the kitchen, said he'd help however he could, and then flew back to Dallas on a Sunday night and was mostly absent for the next 30 months of treatment, appointments, surgeries, and slow recovery. I was there for all of it. I don't say that to be a martyr. I say it because it's simply true, and because I need you to understand the landscape of what happened next. Mom got her second diagnosis 14 months ago. This time it moved faster. By last spring she was in hospice, and by the 3rd week of September she was gone. I was holding her hand. My brother flew in the day before and stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed, and I remember thinking he looked like he was waiting for a meeting to end. The funeral was on a Saturday. I handled every single arrangement because my brother said he'd do it, and then didn't return the funeral home's calls 4 days. I picked the flowers. I wrote the obituary. I called her friends, her employees, her old pastor. I stood at the door of the church and greeted 200 people who loved her. At the reception afterward, my brother disappeared into the backyard with his phone. And then on Sunday morning, less than 24 hours after we put her in the ground, he knocked on the door of my old bedroom. I'd been staying in Mom's house for the last 4 months of hospice, and told me I needed to leave. I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm the executor," he said. "Mom left me in charge of the estate. That includes this house. I need you out." I sat up in bed and just stared at him. He was already dressed like he'd planned this conversation. "What are you talking about?" I said. "We haven't even read the will yet." "I know what it says," he said. "She told me." That hit me differently than it should have, and I didn't understand why until later. But something in the way he said it, too certain, too rehearsed, made my stomach drop. "When did she tell you?" I asked. "When I was here in August. We talked. She wanted me to handle things because I have the financial background." He said it like that settled everything. "I'm not trying to make this hard. I just need you out by Tuesday, so I can start getting the property assessed." I didn't fight him right then. I was in shock, honestly. The week had already taken everything I had, and I didn't have anything left to argue with. I told him I needed time. He said Tuesday, and then he went downstairs and made himself coffee in Mom's kitchen like he owned the place. Which, apparently, he thought he did. I called my best friend. She drove 40 minutes to come sit with me while I packed a bag. I didn't take much. I took my laptop, some clothes, and a manila folder of documents I'd been managing for Mom's business. I almost left the folder. I'm so glad I didn't. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept turning over the same thing my mother had said to me, the last time she was lucid enough to have a real conversation. She'd been tired, and I'd been sitting next to her bed in the hospice room, with the window that looked out onto a parking lot. She'd taken my hand and said, "Baby, don't let anyone tell you what I meant. Read it yourself. Promise me you'll read it yourself." I thought she was talking about some paperwork for the catering business. I'd said I would, kissed her forehead and moved on. I hadn't thought about it again until my brother was standing in my childhood bedroom telling me to get out. Now it was all I could think about. My friend let me sleep on her couch. I lay there that night, staring at the ceiling, going through everything I knew about Mom's finances, her business, her estate. She had a will, I knew that much. She'd worked with an attorney named Mr. Okafor. No, wait, I need to think. His name was Mr. Thorne. Douglas Thorne. She'd mentioned him once when I helped her update her business insurance 2 years ago. Said he'd handled her documents since the late 90s. I looked him up at midnight on my friend's couch. Thorne and Associates, downtown Raleigh, been in practice since 1993. I wrote his name on my hand so I wouldn't forget it. First thing Monday morning, I called his office. The woman who answered was polite but guarded. Did I have an appointment? No. Was I a client? No, but my mother was Eleanor Webb. She passed away on Friday. There was a pause and then, please hold. Mr. Thorne came on the line himself about 2 minutes later. His voice was measured, a little gravelly, the kind of voice that spent decades in rooms where things matter. Miss Webb, he said, I was wondering when you'd call. That sentence stopped me cold. Not I'm sorry for your loss first, not the normal thing. He'd said he was wondering when I'd call. You were expecting me, I said. I was expecting someone, he replied carefully. I should ask, has your brother been in contact with you about the estate? He told me to leave the house, I said. He said he's the executor and that he knows what the will says. There was a pause that lasted just long enough to feel significant. Miss Webb, I think you should come in. I was in his office by 10 a.m. It was a quiet space, wood paneling, framed diplomas, the particular stillness of a place where serious things get decided. Mr. Thorne was in his late 60s, compact, with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He shook my hand, offered me coffee, and then set a document on the desk between us. This is your mother's will, he said. Signed, witnessed, and filed 8 months ago. 8 months ago. 2 months before my brother's visit in August, before whatever conversation he claimed to have had with her. I reached for it and he let me take it. The language was dense and legal, and I had to slow down to parse it, but I found what I was looking for about 4 pages in. My name, Cassandra Marie Webb. Primary beneficiary of the estate, including the family home on Birchwood Court and 100% of the equity in Harvest Table Catering LLC. I read it 3 times. This says I inherit everything, I said. Mr. Thorne nodded slowly. The business, the house, the savings account. Yes. Then why does my brother think? Because, he said, and he chose his words carefully. Your brother was named executor. That is accurate. But executor does not mean beneficiary. An executor carries out the wishes of the deceased. He does not own what's distributed. Your mother was very precise about this distinction in our conversations. I set the document down because my hands had started shaking slightly. Did he know that? Mr. Thorne looked at me over his glasses. He should have. I sent him a letter 2 weeks ago outlining his responsibilities as executor, which explicitly reference you as the primary beneficiary. He didn't tell me any of that. No, he said quietly. He didn't. We sat there for a moment and I let that settle. My brother had received a letter explaining exactly what the will said. He'd come to that house the day after the funeral and told me to get out anyway. There was another piece, though. Mr. Thorne turned the document to a page near the back and pointed to a clause I hadn't gotten to yet. Your mother added this in our final revision, he said. Read this section. I read it. Then I read it again. There was a condition on the business transfer. Harvest Table Catering would be transferred to me fully and without restriction, unless I chose to voluntarily dissolve or sell it within the first year. If I did that, half the proceeds were to go to her employees as severance. That was it. A protection for the people she'd built it with. A last act of care for 8 women who'd worked the steam tables at her side. That's not punishing anyone, I said, mostly to myself. That's just her. That's completely her. She was a thoughtful person, Mr. Thorne agreed. She was also, I should tell you, very aware of the possibility that this transition would not be smooth. I looked up. She told me in this room that she was worried your brother might try to move quickly before you had a chance to review the documents. He paused. She asked me to make sure you knew to come here. She said she'd told you to read it yourself. I pressed my fingers to my mouth for a second because I needed a moment. Mom had planned for this. She'd known. She'd sat in this office and prepared for the exact thing that had happened, and she'd left me a thread to pull, her words in that hospice room. this attorney's name somewhere in my memory, trusting that I'd find my way here. She didn't tell me outright, I realized, because she hadn't wanted to poison whatever was left between me and my brother before she was gone. She'd wanted to give him a chance to do the right thing. She just also made sure I had a way to correct it if he didn't. I took a breath. What do we do now? Now, said Mr. Thorne, we notify your brother formally of his responsibilities and limitations as executor. If he's made any decisions regarding the property or the business without your consent, those are potentially challengeable. He leaned forward slightly. Has he done anything with the business accounts? I'd actually wondered about that. I still had access to the QuickBooks account, my login, which I'd created and never removed myself from. That morning, before I'd driven downtown, I'd logged in from my friend's phone just to check. There had been a failed attempt to change the admin credentials on Saturday night, 2 days after Mom died. One day before he told me to leave, I told Mr. Thorne. He was quiet for a moment. Then he wrote something on a legal pad and said, "Save that, screenshot everything, don't delete your access." Don't confront him yet. Why not yet? Because, he said, setting down his pen, if he's already taken steps to lock you out, we want a complete picture before we engage. We want to walk in with everything. You should know, your position here is very strong. This will is airtight. But I'd rather not give him time to reframe the narrative. I nodded. I understood that. I'd watched my mother negotiate enough to understand that you don't show your hand until you're ready to lay it all down at once. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I had. The QuickBooks screenshots, showing the attempted credential change at 11:47 p.m. Saturday, hours after the funeral reception. A voicemail he'd left me Monday morning after I missed his call, where he said, and I quote, "Look, the house goes on the market once the estate clears, so you need to figure out your living situation. I've already talked to a realtor." A text thread from Sunday where he'd written, "This is not up for discussion. The estate is mine to manage, and that means the decisions are mine. Don't make this complicated." A copy of the letter from Mr. Thorne's office that he had received and signed for, certified mail, delivered 12 days ago, which laid out my status as primary beneficiary in plain language. He knew. He had known for almost 2 weeks. He came to that house and told me to leave anyway. I also found something I hadn't expected. Going through a box of Mom's papers that I'd packed from her office, I found a handwritten note in her handwriting, dated 6 weeks before she died. It was addressed to me. It said, "Cassie, if this is the situation, you know what to do. You've always known. Don't let anyone take what we built. I love you." I sat on my friend's couch and cried for a long time. Then I photographed the note, put it back in the folder, and called Mr. Thorne. We went to the house on Wednesday morning. I want to be honest about what that drive felt like. My friend offered to come and I said no. Mr. Thorne had a paralegal with him. It was gray outside, the sky the color of an old sweater, and I sat in the passenger seat of my own car and watched the familiar streets go by and thought about all the ways a family can come apart so cleanly that you can almost see the seam. My brother's rental car was in the driveway. There were boxes visible through the front window. He'd started packing things, her things, in 4 days. Mr. Thorne knocked. It took a minute. Then the door opened, and my brother was standing there in a t-shirt and jeans, coffee in hand, and his expression went from casual to confused to something harder in about 3 seconds when he saw who was behind me. "What is this?" he said. "Good morning," said Mr. Thorne with a composure I genuinely admired. "I'm Douglas Thorne, your mother's estate attorney. We spoke by phone last month and corresponded by letter. May we come in?" My brother looked at me. "You went and got a lawyer?" "I went and got Mom's lawyer," I said. "There's a difference." He stepped back. We went inside. It smelled like her still, the particular combination of her cooking and her soap and the old wood of the house, and I had to breathe through it carefully. We sat at the kitchen table. Mr. Thorne opened his folder and laid out the will. My brother barely looked at it. "I know what it says," he said. "I'm the executor." "You are," said Mr. Thorne. "And as executor, your role is to carry out the terms of the will, not to make independent decisions about the assets. The home, the business, and the accounts are all designated to your sister. They are not yours to sell, list, or transfer." My brother's jaw tightened. "She told me she wanted me to handle everything." "She did want you to handle the administration of the estate," Mr. Thorne said evenly. "That's what executor means. But the will, which she signed in my office, with 2 witnesses 8 months ago, designates your sister as sole beneficiary. Those are two different things, and you received a letter explaining this distinction. That letter was confusing. It was 7 pages and written in plain English, Mr. Thorne said, not unkindly but without any softness either. My brother looked at me then. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I don't know what he expected to see. Maybe someone who'd back down, who'd offer to split things to make it easier, who'd take the path of least resistance the way I'd sometimes done when we were kids. I'd been the younger one, the one who kept the peace. He'd probably been counting on that. Cassie, he said, and his voice shifted into something I hadn't heard in a while. Not the flat business tone. Something closer to the person he used to be. I didn't think, I thought she'd talk to you. I thought you knew I was taking the lead. She talked to me, I said. She told me to read it myself. I did. He pressed his hand flat on the table. I've been dealing with this for years too. You don't think it was hard for me? Being all the way in Dallas, not able to just come home whenever. You could have come home, I said, not angry, just factual. You chose not to. That landed. I watched it land. He looked down at the table. I was going to give you something, he said, quieter now. I wasn't going to just leave you with nothing. How generous, I said, considering it was never yours to give. Mr. Thorne set a second document on the table. We'll need you to formally acknowledge your limitations as executor and cease any actions regarding the property and business accounts. There was an attempt on Saturday evening to modify the administrative credentials on the business's accounting software. We have a time-stamped record of that. We'd like to resolve this without involving any additional parties, but that's contingent on your cooperation starting today. My brother was quiet for a long moment. He looked like someone who'd walked into a room expecting it to be one shape and found it was an entirely different shape entirely. He'd written a story in his head where he was the one who'd been trusted, the one who was in charge, and somewhere in the process of writing that story, he'd edited out the parts that complicated it. So what happens now? He said finally. Now, said Mr. Thorne, you fulfill your duties as executor as defined by law, and your sister assumes ownership of the estate per the terms of the will. If there are no further actions taken to interfere with that process, this can be a clean and quiet resolution. And if I contest it? You're welcome to, Mr. Thorne said. But I'd encourage you to consult your own attorney before making that decision. The will is 8 months old, properly witnessed, and there are no grounds I'm aware of that would support a successful contest. Another long silence. Then my brother stood up, walked to the counter, set down his coffee mug, and stood there with his back to us for a moment. When he turned around, the hard thing in his face had gone somewhere else. He just looked tired. I need some time to get my things, he said. Of course, I said. He left that afternoon. He didn't say goodbye. He rolled his suitcase to his rental car, put it in the trunk, and drove away, and I stood at the kitchen window and watched the car turn the corner and disappear. I expected to feel something bigger. Triumph, maybe, or the warm flood of vindication I'd imagined through all those nights on my friend's couch. But what I actually felt was smaller and quieter than that. I felt tired in the deep way that comes after something is finally over. I felt the particular ache of loving someone who disappointed you, and knowing that nothing about getting what was right makes that part hurt less. I also felt, underneath all of it, something I hadn't had in a year. I felt like I was home. I reopened Harvest Table Catering the following Monday. I called each of the 8 employees personally. I told them their jobs were secure. 2 of them cried. Our catering coordinator, she's been with my mother for 11 years, said your mom always said you'd be the one to keep it going. I hadn't known that. I stood in the commercial kitchen with my phone pressed to my ear and the stainless steel counters around me, and thought about my mother at 32 years old, folding napkins in this same room, deciding that this thing she was building was worth protecting. She was right. The business had 3 corporate contracts when I took over. By February, I'd added a 4th. I hired back the assistant manager position my brother had, in his 4 days of presumed ownership, already started eliminating. I got the QuickBooks running clean. I updated the insurance. I sat in this kitchen and did the work, the same work I'd always done, except now it had my name on it. My brother called me once, about 6 weeks after that morning. He didn't apologize exactly, but he said he'd been thinking about things and that maybe he'd acted badly. I told him I agreed with that assessment. He asked if we could talk sometime, and I said maybe eventually, but not yet. He said okay. He hasn't called since. I think about my mother a lot. I think about her sitting in Mr. Thorne's office, going through that last revision, making sure the clause about the employees was in there, making sure the language was clear, making sure there was a thread for me to find. She knew the whole time. She knew he might do something like this, and she prepared for it anyway, quietly, without making it a war. That's the thing about her I've been thinking about the most. She didn't protect me by fighting for me out loud. She protected me by trusting me to fight for myself when I needed to. She handed me the tools and made me promise to use them, and then she let go. There's a difference between giving someone something and trusting them to earn it. She knew I'd earned it. She just needed everyone else to catch up. I'm 31 years old and I run my mother's catering company in the city where I grew up. I live in the house on Birchwood Court where I learned to cook and do homework at the kitchen table and argue with my brother over whose turn it was to do the dishes. The porch needs a new coat of paint. The side gate sticks in the rain. I still find her handwriting sometimes, on a sticky note in a drawer, on the back of an old invoice, and every time I do, I hold it for a second before I put it back. She told me to read it myself. I did, and everything she meant for me came exactly where she put it.